Okay, so in the last video, we looked at imposing caps for the skill levels. So you can only buy 5 levels of the bomb skill, and then there's a cap that is imposed to prevent any further increases. We said the second thing that we want to do is that we want to then have the cost increase for each purchase. So rank 1 will cost 1 point, rank 2 will cost 2 points, rank 3 will cost 3 points, or however amount of points you want it to be. So what we're going to do is, to do that, we need to create a variable for each skill. So if you have a tree with 20 skills, you're going to create yet 20 more variables, and each variable is going to check to see what's the cost for the next level. Because what we did, as I mentioned in the previous video, is right now we're using constants. We're like, hey, as long as you've got at least 1 point, the button is enabled. Or whatever the cost is. Or 2 points, depending on the skill. So those are constants. We're saying, okay, well, that's for a single purchase of the skill. What if you can buy the skill multiple times, rank up the skill, shouldn't the cost increase? And as I just said, that means we need another variable for each skill. So let's start with the bomb skill, because that's really the only one that we positioned to be ranked up. So public static int, and we'll call that bomb skill REQ for requirement, and it will start off as 1 point. Let's now go down to the check for the bomb skill, because right now, unlike the other ones, we never did bother putting in anything that checks your skill points. I knew I was going to do this, so I figured why bother. So all the other ones we check total skill points against the constant. This one we didn't. Now we're going to. So technically, if you were to run this right now, you could buy the bomb without any skill points at all, because skill points are not being checked. So what we're going to do is we're going to add an OR. That's a double pipe, so that's the symbol above the enter key holding shift and the backslash key. So you need to do 2 of those. Another parenthesis. And so in addition to bomb skill level, we're now going to see if total skill points, if total skill points is less than that new requirement, so bomb skill requirement, so if it's less than that, then it will be disabled. So like I said, it's not that new of an idea. We already were checking the other skills against the constant. We're checking your total skill point variable against the constant. Now we're checking it against the variable. That variable currently is 1 point. Well, we want that to increase. So this is the bomb skill function when you click on the bomb skill. So we need to do 2 things. A, total skill points, rather than being reduced by a constant, now needs to be reduced by that new variable. So bomb skill requirement. Likewise, bomb skill requirement needs to be increased, because we said we want it to be more expensive with each purchase. Now be very, very careful. This is one of the times where sequence is huge. If I increase the bomb skill requirement before I subtract it, then you're charging too much. You want the bomb skill to be removed before you increase the charge. And what we can do is, just to make sure this is working right, we can just modify the debug log, add in a plus sign, some spaces, and what we're going to do is we're also going to check the total skill points to make sure that it's being reduced by the appropriate amount. Space, plus sign, quotes, space, quotes, another plus sign, and that new bomb skill requirement. And just like that, that's really the new functionality. So we are now reducing the total skill points by the bomb skill requirement variable. The bomb skill requirement variable is being increased with every use. And we're now checking our total skill points against that bomb skill requirement rather than against the constant. And let's see, right now I have 9 skill points. Don't remember what I had it in the previous video because I did a few tests. But 9 is good because that will prevent you from buying all the levels. Because this is saying if the skill level is 5 or if you don't have enough points, this becomes, you can only interact with it. So let's give this a run. So we'll buy it once, and it says 1. So as you can see down here, it says we only have 8 points. We started with 9, so minus 1. The new cost will be 2. So we'll click on it. Sure enough, 8 got reduced by 2. The new cost will be 3. We can still afford it. Absolutely perfect. Because now the next cost will be 4. We only have 3, and so it's disabled. So just like that, you have now added a variable rather than a constant. And that's just game balance issue. How many points do you want it to cost? How much do you want the player to have to give up as far as not getting other skills? Or if they can level up as much as they want, how much longer they have to wait to get the required skill points? So now what we want to do is we'll say else. This will become interactable. Now, we really don't test this functionality here because the reason why it's interactable to begin with is because by default, when you start the level, it's interactable. The reason why you need to do this is in your game, you're going to earn, say, 1 or 2 or 3 skill points, but you're not going to have enough to buy this to begin with. So we need to have it be disabled, but then re-enabled. So it may not look like you need this right now, but you will need to be able to re-enable this. So actually, sorry, that should be true, not false. So what this is saying is if one or the other, if this condition or this condition is true, then it's not interactable. If neither is true, so that means the else is really an and. If neither are true, if this and this are not true, then the button becomes interactable. In other words, it's not equal to 5, and you have the required skill points. So that basically takes care of that one. So let's bump this up to like 29, whatever. And that will demonstrate that even if you have enough skill points or more skill points, you still can't buy that bomb skill once it exceeds 5. So ready? So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 disabled. So even though you still have your 14 points, it would cost 6 for the next one, which technically we really don't need a next. But it doesn't matter. It blocks it out. So I suppose as a safety precaution, you could come in here and you could do an if statement that says if bomb skill is equal to 5, then bomb skill requirement is equal to 999999. In other words, it's a number they could never reach. So that makes the bomb skill dependent upon a variable. Now let's see if we can do that with the other ones. I'm not sure if I want to go through all of them because it's really just rinse and repeat, but let's do at least one more. So public static int, and we'll call this melee 1 skill REQ. So again, trying to keep a naming convention, and that is 1. Save that. Let's get rid of the remark statement here. We know now what that does. It's just telling us what the start does. Clean up the code ever so slightly. All right, so this new Melee 1 skill requirement. So this is what's checking for Melee 1. We'll just double check we're not doing Melee 1 anywhere else. So now what we want to say, well, not that if it's equal to 0, but if total skill points is less than melee skill requirement. So melee 1 skill requirement is 1 point. We're saying if your total points are less than this, disable this. Else it's enabled. So let's go down to the function when you click on the melee 1. And now this needs to change because if you're buying new levels, then hero attack power shouldn't be set to a fixed number. It should be increased. So what you do is hero attack power is equal to hero attack power. So this would be plus equals 0.2. Because as we said, hero attack power will start off as 1.0. In other words, it's a factor that doesn't make any modification. Hero attack power would be increased now. Total skill points, just like in the bomb skill, should be reduced by the new melee 1 skill requirement. Melee 1 skill requirement needs to be increased, so plus equals 1. And actually, I just noticed something I did wrong. The total spent points. Total spent points should also be increased. So total spent points should also be increased by that new requirement, which means we have to move it because we need that to be done before the bomb skill is increased. Sorry about that, guys. So bomb skill level is increased by 1. Total skill points are reduced by the bomb skill requirement. Therefore, total spent points should be increased by the requirement. Then you can change the bomb skill requirement. Okay, so sorry about that. Anyone who is watching, my apologies for any confusion. So we're doing the same up here. So hero attack is increased by the decimal. Total skill points is reduced by melee skill requirement. And we need to take those spent points. Again, sequence matters very much because we're doing an increment now. Oops. So total spent points is being increased by that skill requirement. Then the skill requirement gets increased. And I suppose we could do the same thing in here. We can check some of these other stats. So hero attack power we want to confirm is increasing. And we want to increase, we want to make sure that melee skill requirement's increasing. Okay, so hero attack power gets increased. Total skill points gets decreased by the requirement. Total spent points gets increased by the requirement. And the requirement gets increased. All right. Now this one doesn't have the text object. We can always add that back in. So let's change this again to a small amount so it can only be increased just so many times. Let's run it. So 1. Yep, so 1.2 in the lower corner there. 1.4. 1.6. But no more purchasing, so it is disabled. Okay, so short-sightedness on my part, as I said, when I first started this tutorial, I didn't have the text I deleted the text object when we really could have kept it, but it's easy enough just to add 1 in. So let's go ahead and add it back in I'm only going to do one, and then it's just rinse and repeat, but it's UI, text, take that text, drag and drop it onto the corresponding button. And what you're doing is you're just going to do that again for max HP in Melee 2. You're just going to go up to Game Object and create that UI object. So we're going to bring this over to Melee. Now with the bomb one, I used alignment. You really don't have to. What you can do is you actually can just move this over, and we'll fix the font size because the other one was 18. Good enough for the example. Now, if you don't want to have a numerical display, then you can do what we originally talked about and delete the text object, because maybe it's just on or off, yes or no, you have this or you don't have this, and you don't want a numerical indication there. So now what we need to do, we created the text object, we now need the skill GM to be aware of it, just as it's aware of the bomb text. So again, it's rinse and repeat. It's not really new functionality. It's doing something that we already did once. So public text, and this one is Melee, Melee 1 TXT. Again, trying to keep a naming convention, which I've done with mixed results. We go into the Melee 1 area. Sorry for the spaces. I've actually spliced the video. I was doing some testing. So what we're going to do is, just as you modified the bomb text, what we're going to do is we're also going to modify that new Melee text. So in the Melee section, so Melee text, get component text Melee 1 level, and we already increased the Melee 1 level here. In fact, I'm just going to move this so it displays the right level and save it. So let's see. We created the new text variable. We're about to drag and drop it onto it. That new text gets set to the value of the corresponding skill level. Well, that's it, actually. That's a quick fix, really. And so here's the skill GM. There's the new text variable, and let's run it. And we ran out of points, which is perfect. So that's really about it. I don't think that there's really much more to show you. At this point, it's really just rinse and repeat. Just, go ahead, create yourselves another UI text, drag and drop it onto the corresponding button, create the corresponding text variable up here, and then in the corresponding function, have that variable be set to the corresponding skill level. So you're starting to dance around with a whole, or should I say juggle a whole bunch of different variables. That's just the nature of it. Okay, I think that should do it. In the next video, I think we'll look at like hover text and tooltips. And then if there's any requests, we can go from there. But I think that's starting to wrap up the skill tree, because we've really hit all the big marks as far as disabling buttons, having a hover color, having a ranking system. Yeah, so I really think that the hover text is really all that remains, and that's going to be 1 or 2 videos. So that should do it.